We will now be awarding Wellington's second ever Distinguished Alumnus Award. And I'm very happy to have Sue Bonvalet here. Wave to the people, Sue. And one of the things I love about Wellington is that if you retire from Wellington, you still continue to be part of the life of the school. And Sue came to see me, I think it was a couple of years after you retired. She said, you know, we're old enough and a mature enough school to have a distinguished alum program. And she sort of laid it out for me, and I said, yeah, you're right, we should do that. And then, in an unusual thing, we actually did it. So I want to just read to you the groundwork of this. There are, in order to be nominated to be the Distinguished Alumnus or Alumna of the Wellington School, you must, 1, be notably distinguished in a chosen business, profession, or life's work. 2, you must have a significant contribution or impact on the lives of others, your profession, or the community. 3, you must be an individual who in deed or action recognizes the importance of his or her education at the Wellington School and demonstrates pride in your alma mater. 4, a nominee must be 10 years past graduation at the Wellington School. A selection committee, which consists of the 3 division heads, the upper, middle, and lower school division heads, and me, as well as the alumni relations officer, meets and discusses the nominations from community members. We then work through a process of voting, and we are not required to have one every year. We only recognize a distinguished alumnus or alumna in years where we feel that that is a reasonable and good thing to do. I was asked to say a history about the award. It's a very short history. Cynthia Callender-Dungy, who will assist us in giving Richard the award this year, was our first, and that's the history. I want to say, too, that I've asked John Cruzan, when Richard was in the newspaper talking about his discovery, he mentioned the impact that John Cruzan had on the school. And when we ran to John to say, hey, look, you're in the paper, he pretended that he hadn't seen it. Actually, I think actually he hadn't seen it. He said, what are you talking about? We told him, and then I secretly, every faculty member for all our lives wants secretly, either in the back or the front of our brains, for some student to do a great thing and then to say, in part, this was inspired by a particular teacher. So I am delighted to, and by the way, I find John Cruzan inspiring on a day-to-day basis as we work together, as we work very closely together. I'm delighted. First off, I'm delighted to bring John up because I can't explain anything that you do. But I'm also delighted to have John here to induct Richard into as our 2016 Distinguished Alumnus.
Now I just have to find my proper paper here. Here we go. Oh, well, thank you, Rob, for those kind words. I want to thank all of you for coming out to help celebrate not only a brilliant man's work, but 2 outstanding female athletes. And of course, who can forget our 35th anniversary, which I realized I've been here for a lot of, so that's pretty cool. It's truly an honor to be the first faculty member that's been asked to present a Distinguished Alumni Award. When I first started in 1990, I couldn't have imagined how the school's grown and how our graduates have impacted the world. If you do the math, and I know many of you can do the subtraction because I've helped teach you, I've been here for over 25 years. And for the really nerdy people like Richard and me and maybe Sue, I'll throw you in this group, but I feel a little bit like Bilbo Baggins at his 111th birthday party where I'm giving a speech and I have to avoid insulting half the people in the room. So Before I risk insults, let me move on to the task at hand. As educators, we all have a list of memorable students in our minds, and I think the top of my list is Richard. And I met Richard as a student when he came scurrying into my physics class. Scurrying, I think, is a pretty accurate word with the way Richard moved around the building in those days. He always carried a briefcase, and so it was a full-on, full-size, flip-open briefcase. And the funny thing is I ran into Chris Robbins a couple months ago and mentioned Richard, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "Do you remember his briefcase?" And though that's my first memory of Richard, it's certainly not the most powerful memory. The most powerful memory that anyone will describe when they describe Richard is his intellect and his curiosity. He was a consummate learner. He was driven by his interest in science and education to seek out additional information. I taught him first class of physics, but then he turned around and said we wanted more, so we did an independent study in advanced physics, and which pretty much consisted of me handing him a textbook and off he went. So it's pretty good. Richard, I still picture you coming into my classroom carrying a general relativity textbook. You seemed to anticipate eagerly that I was going to help you learn general relativity as a high school senior out of this textbook. And as a new teacher, I'd only been teaching in school a couple years. I hadn't really worked out exactly in my mind how to tell a student that, I was really horrible at general relativity. I just finished all of my coursework for my PhD in physics. I was a nuclear physicist, and thank God nuclear physicists don't have to do general relativity calculations because they are insanely hard. And I still don't really know how to do general relativity calculations. So it's hard to describe to Richard at the time that, you're asking to do something that, I've just been finished 7 years of physics classes, and I still don't know how to do it. So, though we didn't really master general relativity as a senior, we did spend a lot of time talking about physics, and I have to say how it was great to hear that it was an inspiration for you finding a lifelong passion. So here we are years later, and I have the pleasure of learning from you about the fantastic accomplishments you've made in what other field than general relativity, which I guess I would call destiny, right? So that's amazing. I'm in awe of your work. You've helped confirm Einstein's beautiful theory of general relativity, and I'm guessing that not a whole lot of you get a complete picture of general relativity in all of your minds. And this theory was started in the earliest part of the 20th century and has been tested over and over and over and over again. And every test has always come through to be true, but general relativity made this one prediction. It predicted the existence of what we call gravitational waves. And people have been looking for these things for a really long time. And we have in the room today the person who helped confirm the existence of gravity waves, which, it completed a century-long quest. So congratulations, Richard. And what's even more amazing is he did this by watching what he describes as black holes dance. So if you get an opportunity to ask Richard to do the black hole dance, you may...
Well, now I have to perform.
Now you will have to perform. He's not shy at doing it either. So, and now that you've proved Einstein's theory and helped all the physicists in the world feel a little more comfortable about general relativity, maybe we can chat a bit later, and I can inspire you for the next phase, maybe quantum gravity, something like that. So, I'll just say at this moment, congratulations to Dr. Richard O'Shaughnessy, and I'd like to ask Cynthia to come up and help pass off the award to Richard.
Very big. I tend to be an animated speaker. Oh, this is an assignment. That's not my talk. There's my talk. So I just prepared a few pages of remarks today going through the theory of general relativity, and so I thought I'd begin by stating that no, I'm not. I could. I thought I'm all set. No, I mean, it's been really a very inspiring and enjoyable year. To be part of a revolutionary discovery that not only confirms Einstein's theory, but also we're going to find more, and we're opening a new window on the universe that you and all of your children and all of the people at Wellington will be able to benefit from learning about the universe in a new way. It's really been remarkable, and I promise you, best things are yet to come. But I can't. We haven't turned it back on yet. We're going to turn it on soon. I will not bore you with all the technical details of why we're not on yet. But I do want to say that I'm looking forward to it. So I'm honored and touched, and happy to be here to receive this very substantial award, the Distinguished Alumni Award, in front of old friends and friends, Ms. Bonville and Ms. Benson, and to be reminded of others who can't be here, Carol Goldsmith, and who are here in spirit with Sam Stewart. It's great to be back. And I'm grateful not only for the concrete sign of your esteem, but also just the opportunity to get back and talk with people and reflect on just how long and convoluted but interesting my path has been, and what it means to me personally to be back here after going out and then returning, because I've been thinking, I have, as we all do, children of my own, I have students of my own, and I've been thinking, right about the time that John gave me a call, actually, and we were talking about the discovery, about what sort of lessons I want to pass on to my students and my children from what I've learned in my life's path of this really interesting year and longer. And I think the first thing, John makes it seem like it was predestined. Right? I'm going to do general relativity. And had he taught me general relativity, it would have been predestined. But I had to wait. It's all your fault. So is that I had to prepare for the unexpected, in part because of John. So John inspired me, but at the same time, my path to get to where it was not as straightforward as I hoped. How could you inspire me so? Because, you don't know where life is going to take you. It might have taken me down a different path. At Wellington, I first liked history and biology. And I was really motivated by the study of societies and even genetics. And then I met John. And he turned me to the dark side, literally. So I was really inspired, but I didn't really realize that you could make a career in doing this, in studying general relativity, because no one did that at that time, and I'll get to that in a second. So I went to school and decided I'm going to do engineering, because that is the most logical thing I could do. And I was in engineering classes, and I thought, wait, no, that's not actually what I want to do. So I transferred after a term, I think, to the astronomy department, and which was fantastic. I was learning about stars, the evolution of galaxies, and then I finally, after a couple years, got to take a class in general relativity, and it was fantastic. It was everything literally I ever dreamed of, and so I decided, okay, this is what I want to do. Unfortunately, LIGO didn't actually exist then. There was no LIGO. They were building it, but it didn't exist. And general relativity wasn't a tool that astronomers used to learn about the universe. And I was in the astronomy department. There were people there who realized that it would be eventually, but it wasn't yet. So back to grad school in physics I went. kind of peregrinating around. Wasn't a straightforward path to get to where I was. And then even when you do know where you want to go, I finally found my path. Sometimes the world changes underneath you. So I get to grad school, I say, okay, I want to understand Einstein's theory of gravity, which is a theory that mass bends space and time. Okay, there was one small problem. So people have been studying this for 100 years. No one could solve it. You want to take two black holes, and set them in orbit around each other. Just in a steady circular orbit, like two planets, one around the other. Couldn't do it. You want to take one black hole sitting still, not moving. You couldn't do that either. Solving Einstein's equations on a computer was a legendarily unsolvable problem when I was in grad school. You might think, wait a minute, I know something about that. Didn't I see movies? Yes, in fact, what happened? There were bets. People said, we'll detect gravitational waves before you can solve Einstein's equations. There were bets, famous bets. Right around the time I graduated, after I died actually, so trying to work on solving these things numerically, some of my colleagues who I work with now at RIT figured out, oh, this is what you do. And they solved it. So it went suddenly from something that was impossible and would never be done to just a regular tool that we have to use in our toolbox. Which completely transformed all of our plans for how we would proceed with the future, and it made something that was a fantasy into an everyday tool. And no one had any idea of whether that would ever happen. So that completely transformed the entire field's plans for how it would move forward. And in response to that, I guess the second lesson that I drew is, you have to respond to an ever-changing world. You have to be prepared to learn new things because suddenly new opportunities opened up. Suddenly and you've seen these beautiful movies of black hole spiraling, and not only in the circular method, actually, I have to do the interpretive dance. and closer together, and then they merge, and coalesce, and ring down. I'm not going to use my hair, John. Thank you. I should use John for the losing hair example, but I'll do that later. Problems get solved and become the tools of the future, and then you have to say, okay, what are the problems of the future? How do I learn out how to deal with those problems? How do I address those problems? So now that we've solved Einstein's equations on supercomputers, we can then say, okay, now I have something. Let's go out loud and see if we find something that looks exactly like that. And that, in fact, is what we did. That's what I do. Is looking for exactly this thing and seeing if it matches exactly. And it does, which is why it's fantastic. Now that problem is solved, there's new problems. For example, this isn't even in the research literature yet, but roughly speaking, I can describe this simply. So black holes are little bursts of gravitation. Merging black holes emit little bursts of gravitational waves. So they're like strobes, scattered throughout the distant universe. These gravitational waves, think of them like little strobe lights, far away, are emitting gravitational waves that reach us. Now, if that was light, you could say, okay, I'm seeing lots of strobe lights. But what if there's a lot of lenses, a lot of material in between us that distorts the path that light takes? Well, if we have enough lights, we can figure out the shape of the stuff in between. If you see a heat shimmer, you can say, oh yeah, there's density changes in the air in between us and this distant source of light, for example. You can use it to map out whatever is in between you and the source of light. Well, that means that soon we'll be able to use gravity alone to measure all the material in the universe, because they emit gravitational waves like little sparklers that just sit far away. They come to us and they're distorted by the stuff in between. So, just as simple as that. Just like you can measure this, we have a wonderful door over there it's all distorted and it has a glass pattern. It has a name that I should probably know. And you can see that it's not uniform. And by looking at that glass, by moving back and forth, I can probably figure out, I'm actually trying to do this now, the relative sizes and shapes of the different deformations on the surface of the glass. In exactly the same way, by using gravitational waves, we can measure mysterious dark structures that fill our universe. The structure of dark matter, for those who are in the know, the cosmological distribution of dark matter, which is critical to the formation of galaxies and the evolution of the universe. So that something that was my one foray into research. So that's problems get solved, they become a tool, and then you have to learn, okay, now that I have the tool, what do I do next? Where do I go? And in order to be able to have a place to do that, it's really important to have a safe space to be able to try new things, to be able to experiment, whether or not it's you're in, being on the sports team for the first time. I also was on the sports team. I did not move on to do sports, but I was given the I was given the chance, right? I was given the chance to try and realize, okay, yeah, this is not my thing. That soccer team, oh yeah, not so good. Unfortunately, most of you probably don't. You probably. Yeah, that was before your time. And similarly, I mean, I worked. So my thesis advisor, Kip Thorne, is famous not only for creating LIGO, which is famously was protected by the federal government for decades in order to give a chance to experiment and discover new things, but also as a thesis advisor, my thesis advisor and many others, where he would give us a place to experiment on for projects on our own, to try to figure out and find for ourselves what really motivated us, what projects we have an aptitude for, to allow us to discover who we wanted to be. And so when John and I were talking and asked me to reflect on my journey, this is what I was thinking of. And then he said, wait a minute, you just had exactly a description of what Wellington's values are? I said, huh? And he said, yeah. Yeah, I said, at Wellington, you said, you want to prepare for the unexpected, prepare for an ever-changing world. You want to be able to give students the opportunity to be able to try new things, as I said on the sports team. You want to be able for students to be able to find their own path. John already told us, about taking AP classes that didn't even exist. And I had the opportunity to do all sorts of things. To have a sheltering and nurturing environment where my professors were my friends. And I could talk with all of them. Where my small classes were my friends. It was really nice. And that's, well, now I'm getting emotional. I can power through. Humor, it works all the time. So that, I mean, when thinking about that, and realizing what sort of lessons that I want to pass on to my children, to my students, are the same lessons that I like to share. Performance goals, man. So I'd like to thank all of you for John, for the introduction, for nominating me for this award, for having me here today. I'd like you also to thank you for making Wellington possible, for the parents, the students, the alumni, the trustees, the staff, the teachers who make this community what it is. So thank you again for this and for bringing me here today. Thanks.